I serve as Executive Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. We've asked you here today to announce that we have filed formal charges of discrimination against the Grand Rapids Police Department in response to 2 separate complaints of discrimination filed with our department. The community concerned about bias and discriminatory actions on the part of the Grand Rapids Police Department did not begin with the killing of Patrick Leoya this past April. The Department of Civil Rights recognized in 2019 that the alleged instances of bias and discrimination had reached a level of specific concern, prompting this department to hold 2 heavily attended public listening sessions in Grand Rapids. In total, more than 80 individuals shared their experiences with the GRPD in those sessions. At that time and in the years since, dozens of individuals have filed complaints of discrimination against the GRPD. Currently, the department is actively investigating a total of 28 complaints against the police department here in Grand Rapids. The process of impartially investigating a complaint of discrimination is painstakingly long and can take months or years to complete. In this instance, progress in investigating the numerous complaints filed against the department was slowed by other instances not within our control, but regardless, our work continued. Our investigators diligently continue to gather evidence, conduct interviews, and do the tough and time-consuming work necessary to reach a fair and unbiased conclusion in each and every complaint. In the case of the 2 complaints we will discuss today, that work resulted in a decision to file formal charges of discrimination against the Grand Rapids Police Department. The specific complaints resulting in these charges were filed by Whitney Hodges on behalf of her now deceased minor child, Honesty Hodges. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Whitney Hodges, the mother who filed this complaint, her mother, Elisa Niemeyer, the grandmother of Honesty Hodges, and Honesty Hodges acknowledging that she passed away in November of 2020 from COVID-19. We acknowledge that. We acknowledge your presence today. And also acknowledge the presence of your attorney, Stephen Drew, who was instrumental in filing this complaint on your behalf. The second was filed by Grand Rapids resident Melissa Mason. My office will provide you with the formal documents filed with the Michigan Office of Administrative Hearings and Rules in our request for a hearing. The specifics of the complaints. Complaint 485609 alleges unequal treatment by the Grand Rapids Police Department of Honesty Hodges on December 6, 2017. Police were in pursuit of a middle-aged white woman who was a suspect in an attempted murder. Officers pointed their weapons at Honesty, who was black, as she exited a house they had under surveillance and placed her in handcuffs in a police cruiser. Honesty at the time was an 11-year-old juvenile who did not fit the description of the suspect, was compliant, visibly afraid, and in tears. The Grand Rapids Police Department was unable to show evidence of white children who were held at gunpoint, handcuffed, searched, placed in a squad car, and questioned. In this case, during the search for an adult suspect of an entirely different race. The Grand Rapids Police Department provided no evidence that they treat individuals of another race the same in similar circumstances. Complaint 610406, filed by Melissa Mason, was in response to a traffic stop on January 20th, 2020. Officers of the Grand Rapids Police Department stopped Mason, who is black, and was driving with 3 children for an expired plate. Even though reports show Mason was compliant with officers, she was removed from her car, handcuffed, and was held in a police cruiser for approximately 20 minutes. In the process of our investigation, as in the previously described complaint, the Grand Rapids Police Department was unable to demonstrate that people of another race in similar situations were treated the same as Melissa Mason by their officers. Going forward, an administrative law judge will hold a proceeding to consider all the evidence and will make a recommendation on whether the evidence shows discriminatory action occurred and what penalties should be levied in response. The Michigan Civil Rights Commission will then conduct their own hearing to consider those recommendations and make a final determination, which could include ordering corrective action and/or ordering monetary damages. If they agree with the determination that discrimination did occur, through the effort to do our due diligence in investigating the dozens of complaints against the GRPD has faced significant hurdles and will continue. This is the work we are constitutionally mandated to do, and we are committed to a fair and impartial investigation of every complaint before us. Alongside, by my side, I should mention earlier, is Attorney Marcelina Trevino. She's director of our enforcement division and was behind filing these complaints. It was her division that investigated these complaints and decided to file charges against the Grand Rapids Police Department. So now we will call on a few questions now. So raise your hand so we can call on you.
Are you expecting to file any other charges regarding the other complaints that are being investigated?
Thank you. That's a great question. Currently, as Director Johnson mentioned, we are investigating 28 complaints. Depending on the outcome of those investigations, we may have other charges, and we will notify the community and media when those charges are issued.
Part of the investigation is about the pattern of practice, right, of racial discrimination. What have you guys found so far as far as that goes? Is there a pattern of practice, or is that still under investigation? Or?
Well, as a result of listening sessions, we did receive a number of statements made by residents in Grand Rapids, did examine those, and have been in contact with other authorities about perhaps an investigation of systemic action in regards to the police department. So we're consulting with outside sources in regards to that. We are focused right now on the 28 individual complaints that we still have within our department.
Would it be fair to say it's sidebarred then at this time, or it's on the back burner? Or?
Well, it's not on the back burner. There's discussions ongoing with the Attorney General's office, and in the past we have reached out to the Department of Justice, so we've not abandoned those efforts. We're continuing discussions.
Are there any officers involved?
Let she raise her hand first. I'm sorry.
How do you decide whether or not to file charges in one case versus another? What's the criteria that needs to be met?
Sure, thank you for that question. So that we do have elements that we go by to determine whether charges should be filed, if there's sufficient evidence to move forward with a charge, or if there's insufficient evidence. In these two cases, we have found sufficient evidence through our investigation to move forward with charges.
What specifically, what kind of evidence do you look for?
So we have, depending on the unequal treatment, depending on if it's public service, it would make the difference in treatment in looking at what a police officer's or a police department's policies and procedures are and how they are implemented in practice, and those are some of them. We do have a list that maybe we could provide at a later time for our specific elements and guides to make those determinations.
And just to follow up real quick to that, these two complaints that you have, do they mention a specific police officer, or is it just complaints against the police department as a whole?
So the complaints are actually against the police department as a whole at this time.
That was sort of my question, is that are there any officers that are popping up in more than one case?
So at this time, we currently have those two charges. As we proceed in the additional investigations, we'll be able to see if there are specific police officers that are engaged in these events.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned 28 complaints in total that are being investigated for GRPD. Is that a lot? Can you provide some context, maybe for another department that size?
It's interesting.
So at this time with the 28, because of what came out of the hearings, I think there was an increase in community involvement and concern with the complaints. Right now for police departments, that is the highest that we have currently active investigations.
But again, I want to emphasize the caveat there that we did have a listening session which did generate interest and did result in obviously a number of complaints coming to us because of that specific list, those sessions that we had. And we've not had those sort of sessions in other areas. Yes.
What's the procedural timeline for the, as you mentioned, like the MDCR hearings and the administrative judge
Go ahead.
these two complaints?
Sure. So currently, now that we have filed the charges, GRPD has to be properly served, and we are in the process of service, and then they have 20 days to respond. And then we will hopefully set a date for hearing.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned in both these instances that they hadn't shown anything to the contrary, that a person, so a white person would have been, held at gunpoint and put in handcuffs, et cetera. Did the department respond, or did they give any evidence at all?
So throughout our investigations, we do ask for different types of evidence, reports, and things from both from the claimant as well as the respondent, here being GRPD.
What are the types of penalties that could come from these charges?
Well, it varies very much and is very fact specific to the case that it's involved. So it can involve monetary issues. It could involve policy and procedure changes and improvements, and it can involve many other things as well, as deemed will be determined by the hearing outcomes, as well as the commission's final opinion and recommendations.
How was it, I guess, I don't want to say working with GRPD, but I guess attaining sort of information, was it an easy process, or were there hurdles you had to go through? Were they compliant, or how was the process?
I really can't give you a specific answer to that question because we have so many pending investigations going on. We have received the information that we've needed in these two specific cases to bring the charges, and so there hasn't been any, it's been cooperative as far as the information that's been available to us and the requests that have been made.
Yes.
What message, by filing these charges, what message do you want to send to the people of Grand Rapids? These incidents happened a few years ago. So much has happened since then. What about this move should wake people up or make them care?
Well, simply that the department has been actively investigating their concerns, that we realize at this point that certainly two, in our opinion, warrant charges of discrimination, and that they should, at this point, continue to rely upon our department, our investigations, our neutrality in this, and rest assured that if there are other charges that need to be brought, that they will be brought.
And just a quick follow-up, right? Of course, there's a new chief of police, and there's been different chiefs throughout, I think, some of these incidents. A lot of times it's easy for them to say, well, I wasn't here then. What do you want to see from the new administration at GRPD? What can they do now that they are here?
Well, that's certainly within the new chief's heart. I can't, we're certainly available to certainly offer, if necessary, as a result of this charge, any settlements, any training that they may need in order to certainly make their department a little better than what it is now. But at this point, we're involved in investigation and in a charge, other investigations and a charge. So I would be remiss if I certainly recommended to the chief what he should be doing at this point, because at this point, we think that his department is guilty, may be liable for discrimination. So, but I'm certainly he'll do what he can in order maybe to rectify the situation. Yes.
Have you received a complaint in regard to the death of Patrick Leoya? Are you currently investigating?
No, we've not received a complaint.
Okay. And have you filed complaints against Grand Rapids Police Department before? And what was the outcome to those, if you remember?
Actually, I think we'll have to get someone in our enforcement office to do a search of the database to find that out, and I can get that to you later, potentially.
That's it for you. Any other questions?
How does Honesty's death complicate this case?
Well, it doesn't, in that her mother's continuing the charges on Honesty's behalf, and the facts speak for themselves in terms of what occurred. So I don't think her death complicates this in any manner whatsoever.
That is correct.
Yes.
So you said that you're still waiting to hear back from the Department of Justice, is that right? As well as the State Attorney General's office for their involvement, correct?
That's correct.
When did you ask them, how many times have you asked them for their assistance?
Have I asked them? Once.
Was in the spring of this year?
Yes, shortly after the death of Patrick Leoya, we did meet with the Attorney General's office and have been meeting with them since in regards to this matter.
So they have been helping?
Well, we're having discussions with them, and we've given them information, and we're having ongoing discussions about how and when they may be involved in this.
Can I also follow up? Yes. Also, the state AG's office is our general counsel as well, so we have had those discussions in moving forward and working with them in that way, which is separate from looking at the systemic issue.
Yes.
Just for clarification purposes, so there is a chance that the AG's office could get involved and step in?
There's a chance.
And what would need to happen in order for that to happen?
You probably need to check with the Attorney General's office on that one.
Thank you.
And if I may, we will continue to do our piece in working on the individual investigations, and if additional charges are necessary and brought forward, then I'm sure that they will take that into account as they evaluate how to proceed.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
The specific charges again, is it unequal treatment, like racially based unequal treatment, or what's the specific charge called?
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, so it would be unequal treatment in public service, because law enforcement agencies fall under public service. And in both of these on the basis of race.
Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have your names and your titles?
Yes, that's very important. Names and titles.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm John E. Johnson Jr., Executive Director of the Michigan Department of Civil Rights.
And I'm Marcelina Trevino, Director of Enforcement at the Michigan Department of Civil Rights.
Okay, well, we thank you very much for your time, for coming out this morning and being a part of this press conference. And we look forward to communicating with you in the future about any other developments that occur within our department in regards to the Grand Rapids Police Department. Thank you.